Hey guys, tonight we wander through the dusty dawn corridors of ancient Timbuktu, where the world's most valuable white gold salt rubs elbows with its glittering cousin, gold, in a sleepy marketplace that hasn't quite woken up yet. You probably won't survive this mental trip without craving a mint tea by the end of it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the chat. I'm genuinely curious if you're watching this from a bustling city or your own cozy corner of the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pad across rough-hewn mud brick lanes as the first glow of sunlight spills across the desert horizon. The walls of houses, baked from sun-dried clay, radiate warmth beneath your fingertips, almost as if the city itself is exhaling its night's chill. A handful of traders already root through baskets heaped high with coarse white salt, hewn from the fabled Sahara salt pans some 300 miles away. This salt wasn't just seasoning in the 14th century, it was currency equal in weight to gold in value and crucial for preserving food in an age before refrigeration. You run a finger along a pyramid of rock slabs, imagining caravans of camels marching in perfect cadence to haul these slabs from Tagaza to Timbuktu on journeys that took months. Bird calls pierce the air, a startled hoopoe flits overhead, its black and white wings flashing like a referee signaling a foul in the grand game of early trade. You can almost hear the soft jingle of camel bells approaching as a four-humped caravan trundles into view, salt blocks balanced on their backs. The beasts plod forward with unwavering determination, each step kicking up tiny whirlwinds of ochre dust that dance around your ankles. You inhale that dry scent, equal parts mineral, sweat, and anticipation. Nearby, a cluster of gold dust shimmers in leather pouches, weighed carefully on brass scales. Gold caravans from Wangara, far to the southwest, brought nuggets so pure they gleamed like captured sunlight. Under Mansa Musa's Abbasid-era reign, gold shipments from Timbuktu fueled the renowned prestige of the Mali Empire and funded legendary pilgrimages to Mecca in 1324. Historians still argue whether Timbuktu's rise to prominence began under the Mali Empire or earlier with the Tuareg confederations. But one thing's certain by dawn's early light: you're at the crossroads of riches that few cities have ever known. A vendor here carves a small bowl from soapstone, painstakingly polished until it's cool to the touch, used for mixing salt with water to create brine-stewed grains or to mash savory dates into sweet ointments. That reminds you of some fringe tales, supposedly. Traders would sniff tiny amounts of powdered dried hippo dung to ward off colds or ensure safe passage across the Sahara. Quirky, absolutely. Probably didn't help the cold, but it sure makes you raise an eyebrow. Your senses sharpen as a soft saraba, an unassuming low table, displays slender ostrich eggshell beads. You reach out, letting the smooth round beads roll between your fingers as a faint clinking sound hypnotizes you into trading daydreams. An elderly Timbuktu native leans over and tells you in a hushed tone that women use these beads as negotiation tokens, each bead promising the bearer a modest parcel of rice from a wealthy merchant. You swallow hard, imagining your own spreadsheet of bead-to-rice conversion ratios. No wonder early accountants found work here. In the distance, the call of a dove echoes through narrow alleys. Nearby, someone hammers a wooden sign proclaiming Ali's Spice Emporium, and pungent wafts of grains of paradise, long pepper, and sesame swirl around you. Even at this early hour, the air tastes like possibility and cumin. You step over a stray goat, bleating softly as if complaining that the circus of commerce should wait until it's had its breakfast. A faint melody drifts from a reed flute, a traveling musician warming up before a day of performances beneath canopies. That flute tune, simple yet haunting, is one of many that caravans of sound carried across the Sahara, an unrecorded soundtrack to centuries of trade. You pause a moment, letting the last notes settle into your bones. Your gaze drifts back to the stalls, the salt's stark whiteness, the gold's warm gleam, and the mud brick walls that gave Timbuktu its nickname City of Mud. You trace a line in the soft dust with your toe, imagining the countless footsteps of scholars, traders, and pilgrims who have passed this way. The patterns in the dust seem to spell out a lesson even in the most desolate places. Life hums with endless stories. Just then, a merchant jingles a small metal gong. The market officially opens. Though the sun is barely above the city walls, you feel a thrill. This is commerce at its most elemental, unfiltered by modern packaging or barcodes. Salt chunks lie open to the sky. Gold dust sits in bowls that kittens could nest in, and every exchange feels like a secret ritual. You might want to set up a modern-day swap one tweet for 2 salt slabs, but you resist. Even the idea feels sacrilegious here. A stray comment drifts across the air. Someone grumbles about how the market prices have doubled since last moon cycle. You grin, thinking about late-night Bitcoin panic swaps in your own time. Some things never change. But as the sun continues its climb, the temperature rises too, and you sense the desert stirring to full wakefulness. You take one last breath of that salt-sweet air before drifting deeper into the maze of stalls. Tomorrow, you'll remember this moment as the gentle overture to a day in a city that defies its arid surroundings, where history blends with myth, and every footprint seems to echo centuries of commerce. The muezzin's call drifts through the mud-brick streets just as the desert's heat begins its slow climb, and you pause mid-step, letting that resonant Allahu Akbar wrap around you like a cool stream. You're standing beneath a narrow archway, dust motes swirling in morning light, as the hollow timbre of voices echoes off the walls of neighboring houses. In the 14th century, muezzins in Timbuktu climbed wooden minarets barefoot, using voices trained to carry for miles, an impressive feat when you consider there were no microphones or sound systems back then. You marvel at how effortlessly their calls fill the crisp air, even without a single Ethernet cable in sight. You lean against the sun-warmed clay, half expecting a breeze to materialize, but the desert remains in character still, silent, and stubbornly hot. 3 times you squint at the sky, wondering if you'll see a flock of messenger pigeons come swooping down with messages for the imam. Fringe scholars once claimed that Timbuktu's faithful trained finches to chirp prayer times, definitely a quirky idea that probably never took flight. Still, you grin at the thought of a tiny bird sporting a minuscule fez, announcing Fajr with a chipper tweet. As the last words of the dawn call fade, you remember your guide's boast. No matter how deep the Sahara, our voices can reach across dunes to call pilgrims to worship. That was backed by fact. Timbuktu's minarets were tall enough to be seen from a distance of nearly a mile. Historians still argue whether the original wooden minaret dates back to Mansa Musa's reign, or if it was a later addition under Askia Muhammad. But either way, you're witnessing echoes of centuries-old devotion. You step forward, brushing past a merchant packing away salt blocks as another muezzin from a rival mosque raises his voice in answer. Now there are overlapping cadences, a duet of devotion that sounds more like an impromptu desert karaoke session than a solemn ritual. You can't help but smirk at the modern thought early social media was basically competing prayer calls. A gentle breeze finally unfurls, as if the city itself decided to join in. You inhale, tasting a faint trace of burnt date palm fronds and fermented millet remnants of last night's rooftop feasts. There's a tapestry of aroma here that your nose never gets bored of: sand, spice, sweat, and just a hint of incense from the mosque's hidden alcove. You smell it all at once, and for a moment, the sounds and scents combine into a lullaby for your senses. You approach the steps of Jingoreber Mosque, its walls gleaming softly with residual dew from the night's rare condensation. That dew was traditionally collected by villagers to make a thin porridge before dawn, believed to grant clarity of mind for the day's first prayers. Quirky. Sure, but when you crunch that porridge, it tastes like mud-flavored dreams, so maybe stick to dinner granola. Ascending the steps, you notice ancient graffiti carved into the mud names, dates, verses of the Quran, perhaps scribbled by students who once pulled all-nighters in the scriptorium next door. You trace a faint inscription Umar ibn Said was here, Ramadan 726 AH, which translates to AD 1325. You tap the wall thoughtfully, imagining Umar's fingerwork in that very spot nearly 7 centuries ago. Inside, the air is cool. Surprisingly so, thanks to thick walls and shaded courtyards that trap night's chill. A handful of worshippers sit cross-legged on woven mats, their breath visible in the low light. You slip in quietly, taking up a spot near the back. No need to upstage the imam with your own impromptu cough or soft shoe shuffle. During this pre-dawn ritual, pilgrims recite the Fatiha, the Quran's opening chapter, 5 times a day in total, an enduring practice that shaped Islamic life in West Africa. You murmur the words with them, though your pronunciation wobbles like a camel on roller skates. You can almost feel the energy pooling in that sacred space, as if every whispered verse stitches together the community into a single tapestry. A scholar seated nearby taps you on the shoulder, eyes shining with excitement. He points to a narrow shaft in the ceiling, a concealed opening that funnels sunlight like a spotlight onto the worshippers below at dawn. He claims locals use this feature as a perfect sundial, ensuring the Fajr prayer never ran late. Historians still argue whether that architectural quirk was an intentional design by Andalusian architects or a delightful accident of mud brick physics. But you lean in, grateful for the shade. 3 light jokes drift through your mind. This is the only place where raising voices genuinely brings the house down. You wouldn't mind a tutorial on how to carry a tune half as well as these muezzins. And if only your morning alarm had this kind of projection system, you might actually wake up before dawn. You stifle your smile. Some things are better left unspoken in a house of worship. As the final prayer closes, worshippers rise in unison, stretching limbs that were rigid from kneeling. You share a gentle nod with the imam, who's too focused on pocketing his prayer beads to notice the distraction you represent. Silence reigns for a heartbeat before life resumes distant hammering, the creak of a gate swinging open, and the low hum of traders preparing for the day ahead. You step back into the sunlit courtyard. The transition so abrupt it feels like being thrown from a dream into a furnace. You glare at the sky, willing the sun to ease up no luck. Yet there's comfort in routine. The call to prayer has marked time for generations of Timbuktu residents, tying them to the rhythms of nature and commerce alike. Ahead, a row of donkeys carrying water skins ambles toward a well. Someone jokes that these donkeys know more about hydration schedules than any modern wellness coach. You snap a mental picture. Donkey yoga, Sahara edition. Fringe rumor holds that if you place a goatskin bucket beneath a donkey's tail, it fills itself, a magical hydration hack that scholars dismiss as hot air. You scoop water from the well, letting it trickle down your forearms. It feels chilly against the sun-baked clay of your skin, a fleeting reprieve before the day's heat asserts itself. You sip sparingly. Water was precious, often rationed to a single canteen per person during the height of caravan season. Mainstream accounts record that Timbuktu's aquifers were so deep, wells sometimes ran nearly 30 meters down. Bidding farewell to the mosque's shadow, you step into a bustling square where barbers begin their day, offering scalp scrubs with scented oils to the weary. Tailors stitch leather satchels for scholars, and spice merchants refill their baskets, layering heaps of saffron, cloves, and cinnamon with surgical precision. You navigate through the crowd, an unseen catalyst activated by the prayer's end. Timbuktu's heart beats faster now, pumped by faith and ritual, and you find yourself swept along in the tide of humanity. The call to prayer may be over, but its echoes linger in the rustling of robes and the rhythmic clip-clop of hooves on packed earth. You're carried forward by centuries of tradition, no earbuds necessary. As you slip back into the sunlit alleys, you carry the call in your chest, a drumbeat that syncs with your footsteps. The market stalls ahead glint with new energy, ready for the day's exchanges. You smile inwardly, knowing that by tomorrow's dawn, this ritual will feel as natural as breathing. But for now, you savor the hush that follows the muezzin's song, You round a corner and find yourself standing before Timbuktu's grand entrance gates, their thick wooden doors studded with iron nails and framed by mud brick towers that rise like silent sentinels against the sky. The air vibrates with the low rumble of camels trudging across packed earth, each step sending tiny puffs of dust spiraling upward. Traders pause as they approach this choke point, sending ahead children to sweep the pathway clear of camel droppings, an unspoken courtesy that spares everyone from a very fragrant misstep. Camels, famously dubbed ships of the desert, carry up to 300 kilograms of merchandise salt blocks. Gold dust wrapped in oilskin pouches, intricately carved wooden utensils, and bolts of colorful cloth from the Maghreb. Mainstream accounts note that during Timbuktu's 15th century heyday under the Songhai Empire, up to 30 camel caravans entered the city each week, bringing goods from as far as the Niger Bend and the Sudanese forests. You watch one majestic dromedary, its hump swaying like a water bladder full of secrets. Step forward with solemn dignity. A pair of guards clad in leather jerkins and wide-brimmed turbans stand at attention on either side of the gate. One chews on a strip of dried meat, exhaling jerky-scented air that mingles with the aroma of hot sand. Fringe tales suggest these guards once tested newcomers by offering them a slug of fermented camel milk. If you survived the heady, sour concoction without puking, you were deemed trustworthy. You shudder at the thought of that ritual. Camel latte, though nutritious, is probably best taken in small doses. The lead merchant calls out a password, a brief phrase in Old Tamashek, and the guards nod before swinging back the massive doors with a creak that echoes down the alleyways beyond. You step through, marveling at the way the afternoon light transforms the rough-hewn walls into deep russet shadows. Historians still argue whether Timbuktu's fortress walls were originally built under Sunni Ali's military expansions in the late 15th century, or added later by Moroccan architects in the early 17th century. But either way, you can feel centuries of strategic importance in every brick. Inside the gates, a small customs hut stands at the center of a circular courtyard. A grizzled tax collector waves a feathered quill over scrolls as merchants kneel to have their wares weighed and appraised. Local regulations stipulate a modest toll 1/10 of the shipment's value, payable in silver coins stamped with the ruler's seal. You count the coins clinking in a leather pouch, thinking that your modern self would balk at handing over 10% of a Bitcoin transaction. But here it's just the cost of doing business. A merchant leans over and whispers that some caravans tried to sneak contraband ivory figurines carved in the likeness of camels, or rare songbird eggs destined for exotic cages in Fez. When discovered, those items were sometimes gifted to the governor as gifts rather than taxed, ensuring both passage and political favors. Quirky, perhaps, but effective, though you suspect historians still argue whether these bribes were systematic policy or the opportunism of a few crafty traders. Overhead, 2 falcons perch on a wooden beam, vigilant eyes scanning the courtyard for pigeons or prairie dogs depending on which fringe myth you choose to believe. Pilgrims traveling to Mecca sometimes enlisted these birds to carry small messages back home. Rumor has it a fast-roaming pigeon once delivered news of Mansa Musa's extravagant caravan all the way to Cairo in record time. Whether true or not, it's a testament to how connected the medieval world could be, one wing beat at a time. A cool breeze gusts through the courtyard courtesy of a narrow slit in the wall designed to funnel wind into the interior, creating a natural air conditioning effect. You lean into it, letting the brief relief wash over you. This clever architectural trick, common in Sahelian buildings, keeps the heart of the city surprisingly bearable when the midday sun blazes overhead. You picture modern architects scribbling notes in their sketchbooks, borrow mud brick vents, skip the HVAC. As you move deeper, you notice a subtle change in the cobblestones. They shift from coarse river rock to polished limestone laid in intricate geometric patterns. This marks the beginning of Timbuktu's administrative quarter, where scribes, judges, and tax officials convene. You step carefully, lest you disturb centuries-old mosaics that depict stylized palm trees and calligraphic flourishes. One sly vendor offers you a polished tile for a handful of cowrie shells, an offer you politely refuse, but you carry the image of the tile's swirling lines in your mind. A young apprentice clerk scuttles past, carrying parchment scrolls stacked precariously in his arms. He nearly collides with an elderly judge, sending papers fluttering like confetti in a desert wedding. You help scoop them up, handing him a parchment inscribed with dense Arabic script. He thanks you with a shy nod and darts off under an archway into a courtyard garden. Within minutes, you hear the rustle of papyrus and the scratch of reed pens, another reminder that Timbuktu was once a hub for manuscript production, its libraries containing tens of thousands of texts on theology, astronomy, and law. You follow a narrow lane that threads between workshops where blacksmiths hammer horseshoes and goldsmiths craft filigree jewelry. Sparks dance in the fading light as metal meets anvil, and the smell of molten iron mingles with the faint sizzling of hot oil dripping onto coals in a nearby brazier. A blacksmith jokes that the only thing hotter than his forge is the town gossip hard to refute when he's got the news before even the pigeons do. Emerging from the workshops, you find another set of gates leading to the residential quarter. Mothers hang dyed cotton garments on lines between mud brick houses, the textiles fluttering like flags in a desert breeze. Children dart through the alleys playing a variant of tag that involves kicking ostrich eggshells, which crack with satisfying pops. You bend down, feeling the smooth inner surface of a discarded shell, and wonder if it once held medicinal ointments or sweet honey people used ostrich shells as water carriers. After all, the second gate's tower houses a small shrine dedicated to Sidi Yahya, one of Timbuktu's 3 great mosques. Local lore holds that if you whisper a wish into the tower's earthen stairwell, it will reach the saint spirit and grant you safe passage. You lean in and murmur a hope for restful sleep beyond this journey and swear you feel a warm vibration beneath your lips. Skeptical, maybe? But scholars still argue whether Sidi Yahya was an actual historical figure or a composite created to unite various clans under a single spiritual banner. Passing through, you pause at a humble fountain carved from sandstone. Water bubbles up from an underground reservoir, trickling into a shallow basin. Travelers dip their hands, splashing cool droplets onto sunburnt faces. You cup your palms, drinking deeply and letting the clear water rinse away the grime of the caravan courtyard. It feels like salvation, an oasis in miniature. Beyond the fountain, you glimpse the riverbank, where canoes drift lazily on the Niger's dark waters. Ports bristle with activity as goods from southern forests, ebony, ivory, cola nuts await transfer onto rivercraft bound for Gao or Jennah. You spot a canoe overloaded with barrels of palm oil, the hull sagging so low you worry it might kiss the waterline. A crewman laughs, claiming they've learned to swim if the boat sinks light-hearted resilience in the face of potential watery doom. As the sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across the quayside, you realize how these entrance gates serve as more than mere portals, they're thresholds between worlds. On one side lies the vast, unyielding Sahara, on the other, the bustling metropolis of scholarship and commerce. Each camel's footfall on the flagstones is a reminder that exchange of goods, ideas, beliefs has always been at the heart of Timbuktu's magic. You stand between those gates a moment longer, toes brushing the threshold, feeling both the pull of the open desert and the allure of the city's promise. Somewhere beyond those walls, adventures await you in sunlit markets, candlelit scriptoriums, and whispered debates, but for now, you carry the memory of those enormous doors closing behind a laden caravan, sealing you into a world both ancient and vividly alive. You step into a broad plaza flanked by the colossal walls of the great Jingareber Mosque, their sun-baked mud brick surfaces glowing like molten caramel as the dawn light deepens. The air carries a faint whisper of wet clay residual from last night's community repairs, mixing with the earthy scent of acacia wood beams jutting from the walls. You run a hand along one of those Toron beams, feeling its rough grain, imagining how each stick doubles as a convenient ladder for the annual replastering festival. As you gaze up, You notice the mosque's three towering minarets, rising solemnly against a sky streaked with pastel pinks and purples. These were commissioned by Mansa Musa in 1327 CE after his legendary pilgrimage to Mecca. Funded by the immense wealth he brought back home, wealth so extreme, legend says he crashed the price of gold in Cairo for over a year. You can't help smirking. You'd love that kind of market-moving influence, though your current greatest flex is scoring extra pillows for a better neck angle. A gentle breeze carries the faint sound of wooden clappers, locally called kajal, tapping against the Toran. Repair crews use these like giant scrapers, leveling fresh mud against the walls before the sun bakes it solid. Without annual maintenance, the mosque would literally wash away with the rainy season, transforming Timbuktu back into a sand pit. Historians still argue whether the original design was inspired by Andalusian mosques in Granada or innovated entirely by local builders. But either way, you're standing within a living monument to desert ingenuity. Underneath the shadow of the western minaret, you notice a curious flourish, tiny indentations in the mud arranged like abstract glyphs. A local elder tells you these patterns were once filled with crushed goat horn, believed to ward off evil spirits and biting insects. Fringe lore claims the goat horn bits also resembled miniature croissants, so worshippers could enjoy a snack if they looked closely. You chuckle, picturing secret bakery rituals amid sacred prayer. Your footsteps echo softly across the packed earth floor as you skirt the edge of the courtyard. The mosque's vast central hall lies open to the sky, no roof needed in this arid climate, and you can feel the gentle warmth of the morning sun patting your shoulders. Arched alcoves line the perimeter, shading benches carved from single blocks of sandstone. You sit for a moment, placing your palms on the cool stone and letting your eyes trace the delicate Arabic calligraphy etched into the mihrab niche. That mihrab, guiding worshippers toward Mecca, is framed by finely turned mud brick columns. You lean in to study a crack that runs through one of them, imagining how many sermons and silent prayers have echoed within these walls. Mainstream records note that Jingueraber Mosque once housed as many as 15,000 worshippers, making it one of West Africa's largest religious centers. You'd need a serious breathing app to keep track of oxygen levels in a crowd that size, but thankfully, today you're only sharing this space with a handful of early morning devotees. A cluster of storks wheels overhead, their long wings casting flickering shadows across the plaza. Fringe storytellers say these birds nested in the mosque's Toran beams, delivering letters between Timbuktu's scholars and distant Andalusia. You squint skyward, half expecting to see tiny envelopes tied to their legs, though if that worked, you wonder if Pigeon Post could replace your email spam folder. Nearby, a small boy uses a handmade reed brush to sweep away loose grit from the base of a minaret, his brow glistening with sweat. He pauses to wipe his forehead, then grins at you before scampering off. You recall the crocodile dung sunscreen from earlier in the market. Turns out locals also smeared mud mixed with palm oil on the walls to protect them from erosion. Better than SPF 300 if you ask them, though probably messier than most modern lotions. You rise and approach the mosque's southern entrance, where a low-set wooden door creaks as you push it inward. Inside, the temperature dips noticeably, the thick walls acting as natural insulation against the desert glare. Pillars of mud brick soar overhead, spaced evenly to support a flat roof of interlaced wooden beams and palm fronds. Shafts of light filter through gaps, illuminating dust motes that dance like miniature galaxies in an otherwise hushed cathedral. Worshippers kneel on simple mats, reciting verses from memory. A scholar seated near the carved timber pulpit gestures for you to join a quiet discussion on the hadith, and you settle cross-legged with the group. They pass around a leather-bound manuscript of Sahih al-Bukhari, one of Timbuktu's many treasured volumes, its pages edged in gold leaf. You gingerly leaf through it, feeling the fragile curl of centuries-old paper. Historians still argue whether some of these texts arrived via trans-Saharan trade routes or were copied locally by Timbuktu's famed scribes, but the book's weight in your hands feels like holding a piece of time itself. Your eyes drift to a slender column where someone has scratched a tiny doodle of a camel. You smile, imagining a bored student scribbling during a particularly long recitation. Beside it, an incised star and crescent motif signals that this spot once housed a small lamp niche, now long lost to repair cycles. You tap the column, half expecting it to wobble. Luckily, it stands firm, a testament to the mosque's resilient design. A soft murmur rises around you as the scholar concludes his lesson. Everyone stands in unison, a wave of movement that feels almost choreographed. You follow, stepping back into the courtyard where the morning's heat has softened the walls to a gentle glow. Birds chirp from an adjacent grove of tamarind trees, their leaves rustling like whispered conversation. At the mosque's eastern corner, you discover a hidden staircase leading to a rooftop terrace. Climbing the uneven steps, you emerge onto a flat expanse crowned by battlements that offer sweeping views of Timbuktu's skyline. To the north, you spot the slender spire of Sidi Yahya Mosque. To the west, the squat silhouette of Sankora Mosque, and beyond, the ever-shifting dunes of the Sahara stretching to the horizon. Wind tousles your hair as you walk to the edge, gazing at the city laid out like a giant relief map. Traders ferry goods along narrow alleys, scholars slip between mud-brick libraries, and camels nod their heads as they navigate dusty streets. You feel perched between earth and sky, time and space, anchored by the mosque's enduring presence. You reach into your satchel and pull out a small notebook, jotting down a single thought. Sacred architecture isn't just built, it's lived, repaired, and reborn. You close the cover, tucking it away before the sun's glare makes the ink flicker. As you descend back into the courtyard, you notice a group of children playing tag around one of the minarets, laughing as they weave between the Toran beams. A scholar nearby remarks that learning here starts early. Some kids memorize the Quran before they can even walk. You watch a boy mimic a muezzin's call, voice cracking but earnest, and you can't help but smile at the continuity each generation building upon the last. Before you leave the mosque grounds, you pause one final time under the archway of the southern door. The mud-brick walls glow like embers in the rising sun, a city within walls that pulse with devotion, scholarship, and community. You press your palm against the cool stone, offering a silent thank you to the countless hands that shaped and reshaped this place. Stepping back onto the sunlit plaza, you carry the mosque's quiet grandeur with you, an echo of ancient prayers, a whisper of scholarly debates, and the promise of stories yet to unfold. You slip through a narrow passage off the mosque courtyard, the air shifting instantly to a hushed coolness as you enter the scriptorium. Flickering candlelight hugs low wooden desks arranged in tight rows, each one piled with stacks of vellum and embossed leather covers. The scent of aged parchment mingles with beeswax, dripping, soothing, almost soporific, like the world's gentlest invitation to nod off. Scribes crouch over their desks, reed pens in hand, carefully tracing Arabic calligraphy. You settle at an empty bench, fingertips brushing the smooth, creamy surface of a half-finished folio before you meticulously ruled lines of black ink interspersed with red diacritical marks. In the 14th century, Timbuktu's scriptoria produced up to 25,000 manuscripts on theology, law, and astronomy, making it one of West Africa's greatest centers of learning. Historians still argue whether the majority of these texts were imported from North Africa or copied entirely on site by local scholars. But you can feel the weight of each page humming with intellectual ambition. A scribe leans toward you in a conspiratorial whisper, pointing at an illuminated initial depicting a tiny ship crossing golden dunes. Fringe lore insists these ships were instructions for astral navigation, follow the desert stars to enlightenment. They say, though most academics roll their eyes and chalk it up to artistic flourish, you trace the miniature ship's sails with your thumb, marveling at the precision required to paint such detail with a single hair brush. The only sound is the faint scratch of reed nibs across parchment. punctuated by the occasional drip of candle wax onto clay tile. You inhale deeply, each breath a rhythmic pulse sinking you to the scriptorium's quiet cadence. A distant tapping signals someone mixing ink in a stone mortar, grinding soot and gum arabic into a glossy black. You close your eyes and imagine the viscous fluid pooling in an ink pot, ready to stain new pages with human thought. Your neighbor, an elderly scholar with specks of ink in his beard, pauses to blow gently on his work, drying an ornate gold leaf border. You catch sight of shimmering arabesques flourishing around the margin, tiny tendrils curling like desert vines. He glances up and offers you a scrap of paper inscribed with a mnemonic for remembering Quranic verses. You tuck it into your sleeve, thinking it might come in handy when you're testing tomorrow's quiz. What did that scholar say again under the glow of a hanging lantern? An apprentice carefully folds a sheaf of papyrus, its fibrous layers crackling softly. You reach out to touch one of the sheets. It's surprisingly supple, yet unmistakably ancient. Mainstream accounts note that papyrus supplies came from Egypt along the Niger River, yet some local workshops began experimenting with goatskin parchment to withstand the desert's relentless dryness. Historians still argue whether goat parchment ever fully replaced papyrus in Timbuktu, but you feel the tension between tradition and innovation in your hands. A gentle breeze drifts in through a latticed window, carrying the faintest hint of the noon heat from outside. The window's intricate wooden screen casts moving geometric shadows across the desks, patterns that shift as the sun climbs higher. You follow those shadows, almost lulled into a trance, until a sudden cough jolts you back to awareness. Time to pay attention. A young illuminator dips a brush into a tiny ceramic well of lapis lazuli pigment, the deep blue hue glinting like a sliver of twilight. She outlines a miniature star chart, marking constellations used by desert navigators. Fringe enthusiasts claim these charts guided caravans across the Sahara without maps, but most scholars shrug, preferring to credit seasoned guides and landmarks. You wink at the illuminator. Impressed by her steady hand, no shaky camel ride could replicate this precision. Your own desk holds a half-finished astrolabe diagram in faded sepia ink. You bend forward, adding a note in the margin. Check sun's declination at summer solstice. That note is exactly why this place feels alive. Every margin annotation pulses with questions, a roadmap of curiosity scribbled across centuries-old paper. You glance up at the scribe's dusty window frame, imagining how that single beam of light has illuminated thousands of questions just like yours. The soft scratch of a quill signals the start of a group recitation. A circle of scholars chants quietly to memorize verses before copying them. Their voices thread together in rhythmic unison, like gentle waves lapping against a shoreline of thought. You join in, your own voice timid at first, then growing steadier as the repetition grounds you. These verses shaped education across the Islamic world for centuries, and here you are, part of that lineage. However fleeting, a sudden flicker of motion draws your eye. A mouse scuttles behind a stack of manuscripts, pausing to sniff a drop of spilled honey used to bind pages. You stifle a lazy laugh. It's the only creature in Timbuktu risking a parchment nibble for a sticky payoff. You jolt upright, careful not to disturb the scholar beside you, whose gentle snore has become the room's second hum. Time drifts by in a blend of ink and whispers. You find yourself alternating between copying a botanical treatise on desert date palms and sketching marginal doodles inspired by earlier scribes, tiny camels trampling oases, figures wearing turbans oversized enough to sail away in the wind. You wonder whether these doodles ever earned disapproving glances or if they were quietly celebrated as sparks of creativity amid rigorous scholarship. The lead librarian strides in, her footsteps hushed by the thick straw mat at the entrance. She carries bound volumes to a high shelf behind a carved screen. As she places each tome, you catch the gold-embossed title commentaries on Sahih Muslim, treatises on Sufi poetry, manual of geometric proportions. You marvel at the breadth of knowledge stored here, legal rulings, mystical verses, and mathematical theorems, all side by side. She pauses before the shelf, brushing dust from the cover of a manuscript rumored to contain an early African star map. Fringe historians rave that it shows constellations unknown to Ptolemy, but mainstream experts caution that it's more likely a poetic allegory than a navigational tool. You watch her hesitate, finger hovering over the spine, and you feel the weight of both possibility and skepticism hanging in the air. Nearby, the afternoon sun slants through a small skylight, illuminating motes of dust that resemble drifting snowflakes. You lean back, closing your eyes to the gentle golden haze, and let your mind float among the manuscripts. Each sheet feels like a vessel carrying voices from the past scholars debating theology, astronomers mapping the heavens, poets praising the divine in lilting verses. A fellow scribe nudges you with a smile, offering a sip from his gourd of spiced hibiscus tea. You drink slowly, the tart sweetness stirring your senses. He quips that this tea is the real secret ink keeps scribes alert far longer than plain water. You laugh softly, the sound barely louder than the quills scratching around you. As shadows lengthen and candles gutter low, the head scribe signals the end of the session. Hands pause mid-stroke, and a hush falls over the room. You straighten, feeling the ache in your back from hours of leaning forward, but it's the good kind of ache, the ache of creation. Each of these manuscripts could be the seed of a revelation, a spark to ignite new debates centuries hence. Gathering your tools, a small inkpot, a stubby pen, and your margin-scribbled notes, you rise and stretch, relishing the release. You take one last look at the desks, now scattered with half-finished works pages waiting to be filled, questions waiting to be answered. Stepping back into the sunlit courtyard, you carry with you the scriptorium's sacred hush, a reminder that knowledge is both fragile and eternal. Scholars still argue over every word etched here, yet the act of writing, of preserving thought, remains beyond dispute. You slip past a low-hung tapestry and find yourself in a circular clearing beneath the shade of a massive baobab tree, its thick roots curling like the pages of an unread manuscript. A semicircle of villagers settles onto woven mats, and at the center, a griot, an esteemed oral historian, strums a kora, its 17 strings glinting in dappled sunlight. You sink into the soft weave of a mat, adjusting your position so the baobab's roots cradle your back like an earth-made recliner. As the griot's fingers dance across the strings, a gentle melody unfurls a prelude announcing the evening's epic, the founding of Timbuktu by a legendary Tuareg nomad named Ikala. You lean forward, the kora's resonance tickling your chest, as the griot's voice rises, rich and smooth like warmed honey. He begins with mainstream lore around the year 1100 CE. Desert tribes converged at this fertile riverbank, drawn by the promise of fruitful floodplains. Historians still argue whether it was Tuareg, Songhai, or indigenous hunters who first named the settlement, but every version of the tale hinges on one thing: water. You close your eyes, picturing a caravan's first campfire embers flickering beside the Niger's waters. The griot's meter shifts as he recounts how Ikela, guided by a falcon, discovered a hidden spring that saved his stranded party during a blistering sandstorm. Fringe storytellers swear that the falcon was no ordinary bird, but a shape-shifting jinn in disguise, part eagle, part desert ghost, yet scholars dismiss that as poetic license, more myth than history. You smile, imagining the creature swooping down in a swirl of sand, then revealing its glowing eyes just before handing over a canteen. A gentle wind stirs as the griot's voice softens into a whisper. You can almost feel the sand shifting beneath your feet, hear the desert sigh in relief as water trickled into carved channels, forming the first gardens of the city. The griot describes how Ikala declared, "Here shall we build a city of knowledge and trade," and you shiver at the grandeur of that declaration, much more inspiring than your usual morning pep talk to brew coffee. Around you, listeners nod solemnly, some wiping stray dust from their robes, others gently rocking infants asleep beside them. The air hums with collective memory. Each person here is a living link to those early days, descendants of traders and scholars who carried manuscripts and salt across boundless sands. You glance at the audience. A scholar with a silver-streaked beard leans on his walking stick. A group of women in indigo-dyed cloths share quiet smiles, and children lean forward, eyes wide as camels, hanging on every word mid-story. The griot pauses to tap the chora's wooden soundboard, letting the echo ring through the roots. A hush falls so complete that you hear the distant drip of water from the spring that still bubbles beneath a tiled shrine nearby. That spring, you recall from earlier, once inspired a fringe theory that Timbuktu was built atop a cluster of underground aquifers that linked to subterranean rivers and Atlantis of the Sahara, if you will, but mainstream geologists debunked that, pointing to seasonal floodplains as more plausible. Yet the notion of hidden waterways adds a thrilling undercurrent to the griot's tale. The griot's tone brightens as he describes the city's transformation under the Mali Empire. Mud brick walls rose, mosques took shape, and caravans swelled in size and number. You imagine the courtyard you walked through earlier, now alive with traders shouting prices in Arabic, Songhai, and Tamashek. He strums a faster tempo, simulating the clatter of camel bells and the slap of hoof on packed earth. You tap your foot, entranced by the rhythmic reenactment like a cinematic montage, but without the need for CGI. He recounts that, under Mansa Musa's reign, Timbuktu hosted envoys from distant lands, Andalusian architects, Egyptian scholars, and even Venetian merchants seeking gold for European coffers. Historians still argue whether Genoese traders actually reached Timbuktu's markets or merely heard embellished stories in Fez tea houses. But the idea of ragtag Italian sailors crossing the Sahara makes you chuckle. Did they pack sandals instead of snowshoes? You wonder. A swirl of dust drifts past your elbow, and you follow its arc, spotting a troupe of acrobats balancing on stilts near the circle's edge, part of a traveling troupe that entertained caravans along the Niger. They twist and twirl, defying gravity like desert spirits, their laughter mingling with the griot's plucked notes. One acrobat flips backward, nearly colliding with a juggler tossing bright red cola nuts into the air. You marvel at their agility. You can't even juggle your keys in the morning. The griot's tale takes a somber turn as he describes the Moroccan conquest of 1591, when cannon fire shook Timbuktu's walls and led to a decline in its golden age. He lowers his voice, and the strings shift to a minor key, evoking a world turned gray. You feel a pang, imagining the mosque walls scarred by musket shot, libraries looted, and manuscripts scattered like fallen leaves. Yet even that gloom carries hope. Local scholars spirited away precious texts, hiding them in cave chambers, ensuring the city's intellectual pulse survived. A listener leans forward, asking about those cave manuscripts. The griot smiles and replies that some claim hidden troves remain undiscovered beneath the dunes, awaiting a lucky explorer. Fringe treasure hunters chase those rumors, but archaeologists caution against disturbing sacred sites. Still, you can't help picturing yourself leading a midnight dig headlamp, trowel in hand. Whispering X marks the spot like a desert Indiana Jones. The narrative shifts again, this time to a celebration of resilience. The griot recounts how, centuries later, European explorers rediscovered Timbuktu's legacy, sparking renewed scholarly interest. Manuscripts resurfaced in far-flung markets, and today, conservationists work tirelessly to preserve what remains. Historians still argue whether all of Timbuktu's texts ever left the city or if some collections vanished forever. But the ongoing effort to digitize and safeguard them feels like a modern chapter in the griot's enduring story. A hush falls as the griot's fingers slow to a final, gentle pluck. He ends with a blessing, may the roots of knowledge here forever reach toward the sky. You exhale, the baobab's shade and the story's warmth wrapping around you like a soft blanket. Rising with the others, you feel a lightness in your chest, a blend of awe, nostalgia, and the pleasant ache of having witnessed centuries unfold in a single breath. You dust off your knees, brushing away loose fibers from the mat, and offer a respectful nod to the griot, whose eyes gleam with quiet pride at your presence. As you step back toward the edge of the circle, You hear children mimicking the tale's drum-like kora rhythm, tapping imaginary strings on their chests. Their laughter rings out, promising that these stories and the city itself will live on in hearts long after the last caravan has passed. You duck beneath a tattered canvas canopy strung between two mud brick stalls, the midday sun blazing overhead until the air shimmers like molten glass. Your pulse slows as you sink onto a woven mat laid out beside a crate of crushed chili peppers, their fiery scent prickling your nostrils even in the lull. Around you, the market's frenetic symphony has paused. No clatter of scales, no bartering shouts, nothing but the drone of cicadas and the occasional bleat of a dozing goat tied to a post. In Timbuktu's 15th century heyday, traders observed a mandatory midday hiatus once temperatures topped 40 degrees Celsius, using the quiet hours to rest, pray, or simply escape the furnace heat. You tuck your knees close to your chest, recalling the cool shade beneath the mosque's Toran beams. Just hours ago, this feels like stepping into a secret oasis carved by tradition. Historians still argue whether this siesta custom was imported from Andalusia or evolved independently among Saharan merchants. But either way, it's the city's silent heartbeat at noon. You prop your head against a sack of millet and close your eyes. The canvas overhead flaps once as a breeze tugs at the corners, then settles. Dust motes float lazily in the golden light filtering through thousands of tiny holes in the fabric. You count them 1, 2, 100, and wonder if any are fragments of ancient manuscripts once buried here. Fringe gossip insists that during siesta, unscrupulous thieves slipped into stalls, swapping genuine Quranic pages for clever forgeries bound in sand. You stifle a grin, imagining a nervous merchant discovering sand-filled pages instead of sacred text, definitely a disaster worthy of legend. Your belly grumbles, and you reach into your satchel for a stale date. As you pop it into your mouth, its sweetness bursts against the stale crunch of dried fruit, proof that even the simplest snack can feel like a banquet when the heat slows time. Nearby, a vendor snores softly, head resting on a burlap sack of salt blocks you glimpsed this morning. You recall that salt was once worth its weight in gold, yet here it sleeps, humbled under the same sun that preserved its precious crystals. A stray breeze wafts the scent of mint tea from a neighboring stall where an elderly woman rests on a low stool. She offers you a tiny gourd cup filled with lukewarm brew, sweet, cooling, and tinged with sand. You sip, feeling the mint leaves tickle your tongue, and suddenly understand why this drink became Timbuktu's trademark. It's both wake-up call and lullaby, forcing alertness while lulling you towards sleep. You lie back fully now, staring at the sky through a patchwork of canvas and palm fronds overhead. The sun drips like wax, and you imagine that if you had a candle, it would melt in sympathy. You recall the story of fringe alchemists who tried to distill sunlight into oil for lamps, fanciful, maybe impossible, but emblematic of Timbuktu's blend of practical ingenuity and poetic ambition. In the distance, you hear the soft clank of a ladle against a clay bowl as a cook ladles porridge of millet and baobab fruit for the brave few who brave the heat. Mainstream records note that this porridge was both sustenance and ritual shared among families to mark the zenith of the sun, reminding everyone that even the hottest moment must pass. You flick a pebble, listening to it ping off the crate of chili peppers, and consider hosting a modern siesta festival with Instagram filters and battery-powered fans. A faint rumble signals a loaded donkey trudging by, its panniers creaking. You remember the donkey's secret trick? Rumor says they sported tiny sand-colored blankets to reflect the sun, an early form of animal SPF. Scholars dismiss it as a myth. Someone probably just draped sacks over them to protect goods, but you imagine pint-sized donkey sun hats bobbing down the street like a desert fashion show. Your eyelids flutter as you drift closer to sleep. In the space between waking and dreaming, you glimpse the grandeur of Sankor Mosque looming in the distance, its domes etched against the horizon like carved almonds. A swirl of dust circles your head, evoking memories of the marketplace's morning bustle. You're suspended between so many threads of story salt, scholarship, devotion, rumor, and for a moment, they coalesce into a single warm breath of history. Just as your chest rises and falls with the weight of the day's heat, a sudden giggle snaps you awake. A group of children sneak under the canopy's edge, trading pastries shaped like miniature camels. You sit up, chasing after the giggles, and one child flings you a tiny sweet made of millet and honey. You catch it, startled, then pop it into your mouth. Tiny grains crackle beneath smooth sweetness. You grin, realizing the future of Timbuktu might just belong to these kids who know how to turn siesta into opportunity. An elderly spice merchant stretches and yawns, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of a dusty sleeve. He shakes a leather bag of peppercorns, causing a gentle shower of black spheres that clatter onto the mat. Pepper shower, he mutters with a grin, siesta's gift. You laugh softly. This is the kind of laid-back humor you could use in your own midday slump. You rise slowly, shaking out the stiffness in your leg. Why? You brush loose dust from your garment, revealing a tiny red fleck, probably chili dust from the crate you leaned against. You rub at it, wincing as a tiny granule embeds under your nail, an instant reminder that the market's flavors linger long after the siesta ends. From outside the canopy, distant clangs announce the end of the hiatus, a smith's hammer tapping on iron, the snap of a merchant's stall curtain unfurling, the clip-clop of camel hooves preparing to move again. You inhale, tasting the rising anticipation in the air as the city awakens from its heat-induced slumber. As you step out into the sunlit alley, the market's chorus returns in full force, calls of salt for sale, fresh fish. Manuscripts copied overnight. You squint against the brightness, blinking twice, and realize that the city feels renewed, recharged by rest and ready for another round of commerce. You pocket the remaining date, now chewed to a pulp, and give the spice merchant a grateful nod. His eyes crinkle as he tips an imaginary hat. Welcome back to the land of living. You smile, feeling a surge of energy as the canopy's cool shadow recedes behind you. Walking through the revived stalls, you carry the siesta's hush inside you, a secret calm that makes the market's clamor feel less overwhelming. The midday rest isn't just a break from heat, it's a collective breath that sustains the city's pulse. Without it, gold dust and salt might never sparkle as brightly under this relentless sun. You merge into the throng, ready to chase the next moment, whether it's sweet mint tea at sunset or whispered debates beneath lantern light. But for now, you'll savor the afterglow of that hush, knowing that even in the hottest hour, history takes a pause to catch its breath. You slip through a narrow side alley and arrive at a modest stall draped in dried grasses and tangled vines. The air heavy with the pungent aroma of crushed leaves and simmering broths. A weathered herbalist, her skin as cracked as the clay pots she uses, beckons you forward. You duck beneath a low-hanging bundle of smoky eucalyptus branches and step onto a woven mat strewn with jars of potential cures. Sunlight filters through the canopy of woven palm fronds overhead, casting flickering patterns across a wooden table covered in mortar and pestle sets. The herbalist's stall bristles with an assortment of roots, pods, and powders, moringa leaves bleached white by the sun, fiery jujube berries, and clay-rich ochre dust. You bend close to inhale a heady blend of menthol, earth, and something distinctly animal. That must be the crocodile dung sunscreen you glimpsed in the market. A fringe remedy, sure, but locals swear it kept their skin from cracking under the desert blaze. The herbalist nods knowingly and gestures for you to choose a small gourd cup of herbal tea. You sip ginger-infused hibiscus, feeling a warming zing slide down your throat. Mainstream accounts note that hibiscus tea was used across West Africa to reduce blood pressure and soothe sore throats, a practice that modern studies still validate. Historians still argue whether indigenous healers discovered these benefits independently or learned them from Arabic physicians traveling the trans-Saharan routes. But either way, you're grateful for the relief in your chest. She picks up a clay jar labeled desiccated acacia and cracks it open. Inside lies a pale powder that smells of pine needles and dust. You dip a finger in and rub it behind your ear. The scent instantly sharpens your senses, like clearing fog from a window pane. Fringe lore claims that when combined with powdered goat rib, it improves your aim handy if you ever face a sandstorm of angry scorpions. You suppress a grin. Sure, you'll hit your target, but you'll also smell like a walking salad bar. Next, she scoops a chunk of beeswax from a carved wooden bowl and dissolves it in warmed palm oil, stirring until the mixture glistens like candlelight. Then she adds a dark gray paste crocodile dung, whisking until everything blends into a greasy salve. You flinch at the thought, but she offers you a small sample to apply on your forearm. Hesitantly, you spread it over your skin. It feels slick and oddly cooling. Local wisdom insists that crocodile dung, rich in antibacterial enzymes, protected Surlia hunters from infected cuts. Scholars still argue whether it was genuine medicine or simply kept insects at bay with its aroma of doom, but you note it does smell like swampy nightmares. The herbalist leans in and whispers, "Try this for joint pain," pointing to a dark tincture in a glass vial. You uncork it. The air assaults you with sharp notes of garlic and fermenting plums. You rub a drop onto your knuckles. The tingle is immediate, like tiny electric currents dancing under your skin. Mainstream practitioners recorded that extracts of African plum bark eased arthritis symptoms, a fact supported by medieval Arabic medical texts. You nod appreciatively, imagining multiplex scans in your modern life versus this drop-on-your-skin approach. One is high-tech, the other smells like IKEA's meatballs gone wrong. She gestures toward a bundle of dried peppermint and lemongrass tied with sinew. "For headaches," she says. You boil water in a blackened kettle and steep the herbs. The steam rises in fragrant tendrils that tickle your nose. You press the bundle to your temples, inhaling deeply. Within minutes, the throbbing behind your eyes subsides, replaced by a cool clarity that feels almost illicit in its simplicity. Fringe historians claim Tuareg healers combined these herbs with desert sands to create a head poultice so potent it induced visions, but mainstream scholars dismiss the visionary claims as recreational hyperbole. You wink at the herbalist vision trip courtesy of Mother Nature. No caravan required. Leaning back, you notice a half-buried pot of desert dream ointment, its lid carved from ostrich eggshell. The herbalist explains it's applied at bedtime to promote restful sleep. The formula includes crushed date pits, chamomile petals, and a pinch of crushed kapok fiber. You doubt the kapok does much beyond adding fluff to the mixture, but she swears it helps dreams sink more deeply. Historians still argue whether such dream potions actually altered sleep patterns or simply offered a placebo lullaby. But you're willing to test it later, especially if your nightly playlist can't drown out your neighbor's goat. She taps a gourd of gleaming black powder and murmurs, "Activated charcoal for digestive woes." You recall that charcoal's detox properties were recognized by ancient Egyptian physicians, and traders brought that knowledge down the Nile. Fringe alchemists believed charcoal dust could absorb the snake venom if applied immediately to a bite, a bold claim most modern toxicologists reject. You sprinkle a pinch into a cup of water, stir, and watch the swirling black cloud. You take a hesitant sip. It tastes like sipping the shadows of a campfire. Somehow, it feels fitting. Across the table, a small terracotta mask carved with a snarling face peers at you. The herbalist explains that children sometimes wore these masks during ritual cleansings. The terrifying visage was believed to scare away maleficent spirits. You remember the goatfoot mask you passed in Section 3, and wonder if the two traditions ever met at a desert festival. Historians still argue whether such masks were purely theatrical or served deeper spiritual functions. But either way, you find yourself avoiding its hollow eyes. The herbalist then pours a milky emulsion from a bone flask, ground baobab seed, and water into a tiny bowl. "For hydration," she says, and you take a sip, tangy, slightly nutty, with a faint chalky aftertaste. Mainstream records note that baobab seed milk provided essential electrolytes to caravaneers when water ran low, so it was practically the Sahara's Gatorade. Fringe botanists suggest mixing in dried cactus juice for extra moisture retention, though scholars remain skeptical about cactus growing naturally in this region. You raise an eyebrow. A desert without cacti sounds like a vegan burger without tofu possible, but slightly disappointing. A sudden flurry of motion catches your eye. A small lizard darts across a pile of dried wormwood, its tail flashing like a miniature green flame. "You freeze!" the herbalist's assistant squeals, and the lizard vanishes beneath a shelf. You chuckle nervously. After all, wormwood was once distilled into absinthe-like potions, but you're pretty sure you're not ready for hallucinations at high noon. Before you leave, the herbalist presses a folded piece of papyrus into your hand. It's a recipe for a soothing gum Arabic lozenge infused with honey and powdered frankincense. You tuck it into your pocket, picturing yourself offering one to a friend with a cough back home. "Here, try Timbuktu's lozenge, no prescription needed, just a bit of desert magic." Standing, you simmer the day's remedies in your mind like a cauldron of knowledge. You marvel at how these cures blend empirical observations like hibiscus's diuretic effect with imaginative extras, such as crocodile dung for SPF, embodying the city's spirit of practical creativity. You flex your wrist where you applied the tingling joint salve and smile. This might be the most natural high you've felt all day. As you step back into the sunlit alley, you inhale one last swirl of herbal perfume, letting it linger in your senses. You carry with you not only jars and jars of potent brews, but the enduring lesson that sometimes the simplest ingredients, water, plants, even a dash of dung, hold the deepest cures. You slip into a small open-air courtyard ringed by wooden benches where clusters of men in flowing robes gather beneath a swaying date palm canopy. The air hums with polite murmurs as scholars adjust their turbans, unfolding rolls of parchment inscribed with dense commentary. You find a spot on a low bench, settling cross-legged and smoothing the dust from your garment, ready to witness the public debate. At the courtyard's center, a low platform holds two elder scholars, each flanked by attentive students. One unfurls a heavily annotated manuscript of Malacca jurisprudence. The other brandishes a stack of astronomical tables charting stars over West Africa. In 16th century Timbuktu, such forums drew audiences numbering in the hundreds, bringing together theologians, astronomers, and legal experts. Historians still argue whether these debates were scheduled weekly under royal patronage or convened more informally in response to pressing questions. But either way, you're about to see Timbuktu's mind at full throttle. The first scholar, a dignified man with a silver-streaked beard, begins by proposing a nuanced interpretation of zakat distribution charitable giving, citing verses from the Quran and tracing the practice's origins to Mecca. He marshals quotations from North African jurists, weaving them into a tapestry of legal precedent. His voice is measured, each point building on the last like a caravan stringing beads, and the audience nods appreciatively at his meticulous reasoning. Not to be outdone, the second scholar rises, gesturing toward a celestial map that charts the rising of Sirius, the Tooth of Sothis, and its correlation with the Niger's flood cycle. He argues that practical knowledge of star patterns was indispensable for timing agricultural taxes and festival dates. Mainstream records confirm that Timbuktu's scholars contributed significantly to African astronomy, even influencing later European treatises. You lean in, marveling at how seamlessly law and science converge here. A hush falls as the first scholar issues a pointed critique. If one adjusts zakat payments based on lunar sightings that can be obscured by Saharan haze, does that not undermine legal certainty? The second scholar pauses, stroking his beard, then replies that a lunar calendar aligned with agricultural realities is more just than rigid formulas. Historians still argue whether Timbuktu's jurists formally recognized observational calendars or adhered strictly to urban North African models, but your ears drink in every syllable. A ripple of laughter breaks out as a student shouts, "What about the case of the man who paid zakat on 30 cowries instead of 31 because moonlight fooled his sight?" The audience chuckles, picturing that hapless farmer illuminated by a single oil lamp. Fringe anecdotes claim such disputes once escalated to duels with date palm canes, though most scholars dismiss that as colorful exaggeration. You grin at the image two robed men clattering through the marketplace, debating cowrie counts with dramatic flair. The debate widens as the scholars cite sources in Arabic, Songhai, and Tamashek, weaving linguistic dexterity into their arguments. You find yourself mentally juggling transliterations, impressed by how these men navigate multiple tongues with ease. Nearby, a student whispers that multilingualism was so prized here that children memorize texts in 3 languages before they learn to write in 1. Historians still argue whether formal language education included Bamanankan, or if it remained confined to oral instruction, but the debate's polyglot richness rings true. The second scholar then points to a fringe claim carved into a marginal note that Timbuktu's scholars possessed a rare manuscript blending Ptolemaic astrology with indigenous star lore, suggesting Sirius was the soul of a departed saint. You blink, picturing cosmic saints wandering the night sky. The first scholar dismisses it as poetic allegory, while others insist that legend and science often mingled here. Scholars still argue whether such syncretic texts were widely read or merely the musings of eccentric copyists. He adds, encouraged, an eager student stands and poses a question. Given conflicting interpretations, should we prioritize the literal or metaphorical readings of astronomical omens when issuing legal rulings? A hush descends as both elders exchange glances. The first scholar huffs that the literal always gives way to community welfare, while the second counters that omens guided decisions in the shadow of uncertainty. Their exchange crackles with respectful tension. You notice a flicker of movement as a merchant slips in, carrying a tray of mint tea on a silver platter. He weaves through benches, offering cups sweetened with desert honey. You accept one, the steam curling into the debate's heated atmosphere. You sip, the cool sweetness cutting through the intensity of legalistic discourse, a reminder that even the driest arguments soften with mint. Debate resumes over the filling of madrasa endowments, literally wasiyef, funded by revenues from date palms and salt mines. The scholars parse Arabic legal treatises to determine whether revenues from communal assets should support student stipends or mosque repairs first. Mainstream documents note that Timbuktu's Wakef system sustained its renowned learning centers for centuries. Historians still argue whether these endowments ever exceeded local revenues or depended on imperial subsidies, but the intricacies of financial theology keep you riveted. At one point, the first scholar pauses to rub his temples, conceding that some decisions may require the counsel of both legal and astronomical experts. His candor draws approving murmurs. The second scholar smiles, offering a rare olive branch. Then let us forge a council that bridges the heavens and the law. The crowd erupts in polite applause, as though witnessing a treaty between earthly and celestial authorities. A fringe enthusiast shouts from the back, "Bring back jinn as third-party arbitrators." Some gasp while others suppress smirks. Even the scholars exchange amused looks. "Perhaps," the first elder replies, "but I prefer ruling by ink rather than incantation." Laughter ripples through the assembly, shaking date palm fronds overhead like applause. As voices lower and the sun shifts westward, the debate winds down. The scholars offer closing remarks, emphasizing that knowledge must remain in dialogue, ever adapting to new insights. You reflect on that principle, aware that your own journey through Timbuktu has been a continuous conversation between fact and myth, tradition and innovation. Rising from your bench, you offer a respectful nod to the elders before stepping aside. Students gather around, eager to gather stray arguments, their eager voices buzzing like bees around honey jars. You tuck your empty teacup into your satchel, grateful for the refreshment and for the brief respite of sweetness amid intellectual rigor. As you slip away, the courtyard's hush returns an echo of the quiet curiosity that fuels every debate here. You carry the resonance of those voices in your mind, each argument a pebble skipping across the vast pool of human understanding. You step into a cool, shadowed alcove off the main courtyard, where stacks of writing materials lean against a mud brick wall like silent sentinels. The afternoon sun filters through a slatted wooden screen, casting slender ribbons of light across bundles of papyrus scrolls and neatly rolled parchments. You inhale deeply, the mingled scents of dried reed, animal hide, and a faint undertone of goatskin oil drifting from old bindings. A bespectacled illuminator beckons you over a low table where two trays lie side by side, one heaped with thin, fibrous sheets of papyrus, the other piled with supple, creamy parchments made from goat and sheepskins. In Timbuktu's golden era, papyrus was imported from Egypt via river and caravan, prized for its affordability and lightness, while parchment, though more costly, offered remarkable durability in the Sahara's merciless dryness. Historians still argue whether local workshops mastered parchment making independently or relied on North African tutors. But either way, you're about to witness a debate older than your grandmother's bedtime stories. The illuminator picks up a sheet of papyrus, its surface crisscrossed with natural veins like a desert's cracked lake bed. Papyrus, he says in a hushed tone, absorbs ink quickly but tears under rough handling. He flicks the corner, and you see a tiny fibrous split form like a micro-desert canyon. Mainstream records note that papyrus scrolls tended to degrade within decades if exposed to humidity or insect activity, prompting scholars to seek sturdier alternatives. You imagine your modern Kindle shattering into paper shards every time you sneezed. Next, he runs a finger across a parchment sheet. Its texture is smooth and cool, almost velvety. Parchment resists humidity and lasts centuries, he explains, but it demands time-consuming preparation: soak, scrape, stretch, dry, and finish. You press gently, feeling the slight give under your fingertip, like caressing a well-worn leather seat. Fringe gossip insists that some parchment makers use donkey brains in their soaking vats to improve suppleness, surely an early form of extreme spa treatment. You smirk, picturing a donkey day spa where a relieved mule emerges with glowing skin and an attitude adjustment. At the far end of the table, a third pile catches your eye stiff, gray-blue sheets woven from cultivated palm fibers. A fringe experiment, said to resist insect damage and wick moisture away. Most scholars dismiss it as a dead end, literally, a dead palm frond, but you lean in to trace the rough, papery weave, half intrigued by this botanical aspiration toward permanence. The illuminator gestures to two small test pages, one scribbled in crimson ink verses of poetry on papyrus, the other adorned with gold leaf calligraphy on parchment. You compare them. On papyrus, the ink feathers slightly, spreading into delicate halos around each letter. On parchment, the ink sits crisply on the surface, edges sharp enough to cut through silence. You imagine a medieval Instagram post, #parchment wins or #team papyrus. Nearby, a vendor rattles a brass scale, weighting samples of both materials. You swallow as he plucks a hair-thin parchment fragment later identified as part of a 15th century Quranic manuscript and sets it on one pan. Across, he pours handfuls of papyrus flakes until the scale tips. One parchment leaf equals nearly 3 papyrus sheets in weight. He notes. You nod, thinking about your smartphone's battery life versus the marathon endurance of parchment. A hush falls as a visiting scholar arrives, draped in indigo robes that blur into the shadows. He opens a small leather-bound journal and reads an academic paper arguing that parchment workshops in Timbuktu used camel skins when goat hides ran short, explaining slight variations in thickness and texture. Historians still argue whether camel parchment was considered inferior or simply more abundant during peak caravan seasons. But your fingers itch to touch a sample, if only to verify the claim. Then the illuminator unveils a fringe legend that some maverick scribes experimented with birch bark brought from northern forests, binding it with gum, Arabic, and animal fat into rudimentary notebooks. No mainstream manuscripts have survived to prove it, but local storytellers swear their grandparents wrote secret love letters on birch pages hidden in date palm fronds. You chuckle, picturing a clandestine romance carried in a VHS tape-sized bark folio. You run your thumb across a labeled jar of ink samples, soot-based for papyrus, gallnut tannin for parchment. The former yields a deep onyx mark, the latter a warmer sepia tone. The illuminator dips his pen in each and draws a looping flourish, one dark as midnight on papyrus, the other bone-white parchment glowing with a golden halo. Different canvases, he muses, shape the art itself. You nod, feeling unexpectedly philosophical about the marriage of medium and message. A whisper ripples through nearby artisans' word that the emir's librarian prefers parchment for official decrees, citing its grandeur and cachet. Yet many students still favored papyrus for casual notes, cheaper, lighter, and disposable when filled. Historians still argue whether this dual system created a social divide between elite scholars and itinerant students, but you imagine a dusty lecture hall where aspirants scramble for the last sheets of papyrus like college freshmen at a ramen giveaway. You step back and observe the quiet controversy: papyrus, humble and fleeting; parchment, regal and enduring; palm fiber, experimental and ephemeral. Each material carries its own sensory story: papyrus crackling under pressure, parchment whispering soft resignation to the touch, palm fiber scratching like tiny thorns. You close your eyes, letting the textures and scents swirl into a tactile symphony. The illuminator offers you a choice. Try your hand at copying a short benediction on either surface. You pick parchment, confident in its smoothness, only to immediately smear a line of gold leaf across the margin. You curse softly: too much flair, too little practice. The scholars around you chuckle, kindly noting that even masters botch first strokes. You laugh, conceding that some skills demand centuries of refinement. Before you leave, the illuminator presses a folded scrap of parchment into your hand, inscribed with a proverb: words on flesh outlast words on stalk. You smile, tucking it carefully into your robe. As you step back into the sunlit alley, the scent of treated hide and reed dust lingers under your nostrils, a tactile reminder that the fight between papyrus and parchment is more than academic. It's woven into every page of history. You slip into a dim courtyard as the sun dips low, transforming the sky into molten ochre and rose. Oil lamps flicker along a low stone ledge, their tiny flames dancing like court jesters eager to perform. You settle cross-legged on a woven goat hair mat beside a low wooden saraba table, the cool evening breeze brushing against your sun-warmed skin. Salt-crusted bricks beneath you hold lingering heat, but the air carries the promise of relief mint tea time. A silver kettle perched atop a small clay brazier hisses softly as its water begins to boil. The scent of smoldering acacia wood mingles with the sweet tang of date palm smoke, creating an aroma that feels both ancient and intimate. Mainstream records note that mint tea was introduced to West Africa by Moroccan traders in the 16th century, quickly adopted as a symbol of hospitality and a means to cool parched throats after long days in the sun. Historians still argue whether local varieties of mint such as nana and peppermint were cultivated here long before foreign seeds arrived, but as you watch the kettle, that debate feels delightfully irrelevant. The tea ritual unfolds like a gentle ceremony. A woman in indigo robes, her silver bangles chiming softly, pours handfuls of fresh mint sprigs into a low, squat teapot. She crushes the leaves lightly with her fingertips, releasing the bright green oils, then sprinkles in a lump of raw sugar the size of a chickpea, a sweet anchor to balance the herb's brisk edge. Fringe tales whisper that some gourmands once steeped mint with crushed rose petals and powdered ostrich eggshell. Believing the shell's calcium added spiritual firmness to the brew, you raise an eyebrow, imagining the teeth-chattering crunch of eggshell tea, but that eccentricity only deepens your appreciation for the simple elegance before you. She ladles hot water over the mint, the liquid hissing as it meets cold leaves, then corks the teapot and lets it steep for a heartbeat of minutes. You inhale deeply, tasting a hint of brine from the nearby river and a whisper of floral resin from torn eucalyptus twigs. Even before the first pour, your senses are primed sweet, cool, and slightly electric, like a desert mirage turned tangible. When the time feels right, she lifts the teapot and pours the tea into a tiny glass cup, holding the spout high so the amber liquid arcs through the air, frothing as it lands. This aeration isn't just for show, it releases volatiles that sharpen flavor, a refinement that took centuries to perfect. You watch the foam crest in the cup and marvel at how something so simple can display such careful craftsmanship. You cradle the warm glass in your hand, letting the heat seep into your palm. The first sip hits your tongue with a soft rush, cool mint tempered by smooth sweetness, the faintest hint of grit from desert dust, and an undertone of smoke. You close your eyes, willing the flavors to unfold slowly, like a caravan cresting a dune to reveal an oasis. All around you, low murmurs of appreciation ripple through small groups gathered for the ritual. Lamps cast long, quivering shadows across carved wooden screens, and every surface seems to breathe, bathed in mellow light. A scholar seated nearby lifts his cup in salute. "To the mint," he says, voice hushed, "for teaching our tongues to sing." You chuckle softly. This might be the only place where herbs earn ovations. Between sips, you notice a tiny flicker of movement, a gecko skittering across a lampstand, pausing to lick condensation from its glass surface. Fringe observers swear that geckos once guided lost travelers to hidden wells, drawn by the water's reflection in lanterns. You blink, picturing a lizard guru leading a caravan off course through moonlit dunes, entertaining, if entirely unsubstantiated. A gentle debate springs up among your companions: should the tea be poured 3 times for good luck, or 5 times to honor the 5 daily prayers? Some argue that repeating the pour 3 times reflects the triad of earth, water, and spirit. Others maintain that 5 pours correspond to the pillars of faith, a symbolic echo. Historians still argue whether the original mint tea ceremony was a private household affair or codified at court gatherings. But you find the discussion as invigorating as the tea itself. The woman refills your cup, this time adding a tiny sprig of crushed peppermint flower atop the foam. It flutters like a green butterfly before settling. You smile at the sight, picturing medieval artists painstakingly illustrating mint's delicate blossoms in herbals. A fringe herbalist once claimed those petals had mild soporific properties, ensuring restful sleep after the evening's last cup, though mainstream physicians dismissed it as wishful thinking. You tuck that idea away for potential later testing. As darkness thickens, lamps multiply, revealing other details: carved lantern holders fashioned from ostrich eggshell, their interiors lined with gold leaf to amplify glow. Soot-blackened clay bowls used to hold coals, each etched with calligraphic prayers for serenity. You trace those patterns with your eyes, letting the delicate swirls lull your mind. You take another sip, noticing how the tea's temperature has cooled to a gentle warmth, precisely the sweet spot for savoring without scalding. The walls absorb the gentle chatter confessions of long-lost loves, debates over legal rulings, quiet laughter at whispered jokes. Mint tea here isn't just a drink, it's a social lubricant that dissolves hierarchies, allowing scholars and traders to mingle as equals. Nearby, a young apprentice refills a lamp's oil reservoir, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He dips a slender wisp of cotton into sesame oil, trims the wick, and lowers it into the lamp's spout. The flame flickers back to life, casting a slender tongue of light over the assembled faces. A fringe architect claims that Timbuktu's lamp designs influenced Andalusian lantern styles, but most experts dismiss this as overreaching cultural cross-pollination. You watch the flame ripple and consider that some connections, like the dance of light and shadow, transcend precise origins. Your cup now empty, you inhale its residual aroma, a final burst of mint, a whisper of smoke, and that lingering echo of sugar's sweetness. You tuck the glass onto the table and lean back, letting your spine rest against the warmth of bricks that still hold sunlight's memory. In the distance, the muezzin's evening call begins the Maghrib prayer, marking the day's end. It rises softly, weaving through lantern light like a lullaby. You rise slowly, head buzzing with gentle caffeine and herb-fueled calm. You offer a silent thanks to the mint, to the lamps, to the fleeting magic of this ritual that balances heat and cool, light and dark, anticipation and repose. As you step away from the circle, the last amber glow of your lantern dims, leaving you with the soft swirl of night air against your skin. Your breath slows, echoing the rhythm of lantern flames guttering to rest. You carry the ritual's stillness within you, a cooling draft in your bones, ready for whatever dreams lie ahead. You slip into the twilight alleys where lanterns swaying from wooden beams cast dancing pools of golden light across cobblestones polished smooth by centuries of footsteps. The air is thick with the heady perfume of spices, ground ginger, smoky paprika, and a whisper of powdered clove that tickles your nostrils like an affectionate nudge. You wander past stalls draped in rich indigo cloth, each lit by a single oil lamp whose flame shudders against the gentle night breeze, revealing bowls brimming with vibrant powders. A vendor leans forward, offering you a pinch of Szechuan pepper mixed with local grains of paradise. You raise an eyebrow. Szechuan? Yes. Trade routes from the Far East reached here through Alexandria and Fez, bringing exotic flavors to the Sahara's edge. Mainstream records note that by the 16th century, Timbuktu merchants traded not only gold and salt but also rare spices imported from India and China, a testament to the city's global connections. Historians still argue whether these peppercorns were prized more for culinary flair or as symbols of status in grand banquets. But either way, you can't resist the tingle they leave on your tongue. Nearby, a low table displays piles of softly glowing lanterns carved from ostrich eggshell, their interiors lined with beaten copper. A fringe artisan claims these lanterns once served as secret signal devices, sending flickers of coded light between allied trading posts across the desert. Strict scholars dismiss that as fanciful rumor. Most traffic signals here were more likely delivered by smoke or hoofbeat, but you can't help picturing clandestine messages blinking across dunes like moths guiding lost travelers. You pause at a cluster of copper pots simmering over charcoal embers, their lids slightly ajar to release plumes of aromatic steam. The cook lifts a lid, revealing spoonfuls of rich peanut stew bubbling with okra and wild spinach. He beckons you to taste. You dip a wooden spoon into the fragrant broth and let it rest briefly against your lips, warning enough. The first spoonful washes over your palate with warm nuttiness and a velvety finish, the okra's subtle mucilage giving the stew a comforting body. You nod appreciatively, recalling that medieval Arabic medical texts praised ground peanuts for nourishing the blood, an early source of protein that fueled caravanners on long desert crossings. A troupe of dancers shuffles nearby, their feet tapping in rhythm on the stone slabs while tambourine jingles punctuate each step. They wear skirts made from dyed goat leather that swirls around them like a living flame. Fringe rumor suggests these dances once summoned rain during droughts, but mainstream anthropologists argue it was simply a lively mid-market performance to keep shoppers awake through the late hours. You tap your foot along, half tempted to join, but you resist. Your coordination peaked this morning. Thank you very much. As you continue, you pass a stall lined with delicate glassworks, tiny perfume bottles shaped like date palms, and slender flasks etched with geometric motifs. The glass blower flicks a blowpipe, sending a molten orb spinning in the glow of his lantern. You watch as he precisely pinches the glass, creating a perfect miniature vase. It's easy to forget that across the Sahara, glass was once imported from Venetian merchants, but by Timbuktu's peak, savvy artisans had learned the art locally, fusing silica with river sand and ash. Historians still argue whether these workshops ever rivaled European kilns in quality, but blades of light passing through that tiny vase suggest skill beyond your modern DIY kits. A cluster of scholars gathers at a low bench lit by a trio of oil lamps dripping golden wax. They discuss a newly arrived Persian astrology treatise, debating the alignment of Jupiter and Saturn's conjunction in 1583 CE and its supposed influence on the next harvest. Al-Kafs al-Numu, one murmurs, using the local term for growth leap. Historians still argue whether such conjunctions truly affected climate patterns or were simply poetic metaphors for prosperous periods. But the scholars' earnest discussion shines as brightly as their lamps. You lean in, savoring the soft rustle of parchment pages and low baritone voices weaving science and superstition. Further on, You spot a vendor carving intricate wooden toys, camel figurines on tiny wheels, spinning tops shaped like mosques, and small animals that clack together when tilted. You pick up a camel and roll it gently across the cobblestones. It bobs along with satisfying wobble. You recall that parents once used these toys to teach children about trade routes and animal husbandry, playing while learning. A fringe treatise claims some possessed hidden compartments for smuggling tiny manuscripts, but most agree it's a fanciful exaggeration. Still, you tuck the toy into your bag as a souvenir of Timbuktu's playful side. Your path takes you past a row of leather-bound books stacked on woven mats, their covers embossed with gold leaf. A keeper lifts one, a 15th century treatise on desert flora, pages edged in Moroccan red pigment. You flip through, inhaling the musty scent of time. Preserve it for another 5 centuries, the keeper jokes, and you'll have first dibs on its rarity. You smile, mindful that modern digitization efforts couldn't exist without these precious originals. Historians still argue whether local libraries were open to all or restricted to elite scholars. But every volume here seems to beckon eager hands. Just ahead, a cluster of perfume vendors offers blends distilled from desert roses, frankincense, and musk. One mischievous merchant challenges you to identify each note blindfolded. You accept, and he ties a soft cloth around your eyes. He holds up 4 small vials, one labeled Saharan rose, one frankincense, another camphor, and the last ambergris. You inhale deeply, tempted to fake it, but you correctly name 3 out of 4, stumbling only on ambergris. He laughs, awarding you a spritz of rosewater that cools your face with delicate floral sweetness. Above you, the sky deepens to indigo, dotted with countless stars. A scholar points out the Pleiades and Orion, remarking on their shifting positions since Ptolemy's era. Historians still argue whether such observations influenced local planting calendars or merely provided poetic inspiration for desert poets. But the juxtaposition of spice's warmth and the night sky's chill feels profoundly timeless. You shiver delightfully, wrapping your cloak tighter around your shoulders. A sudden chorus of laughter draws you to a puppet theater set beneath a lantern-lit archway. Tiny puppets carved from gourds enact a comedic farce, a camel complaining about oversized burdens, a merchant trying to bargain with a goat, and a scholar lost in a labyrinth of scrolls. You settle on a crate, watching as the puppeteer manipulates strings with nimble fingers. Fringe enthusiasts claim these puppets once delivered political satire beneath Moroccan rule. But most records suggest they were harmless amusements to lighten long nights. You lean forward, chuckling as the goat outwits every other character. Your steps slow as you reach a small fountain at the alley's end, its carved sandstone basin reflecting lantern light and shimmering ripples. A vendor offers chilled mint-infused snow from the nearby dunes, packed in insulated goat-hide drums and sprinkled with pomegranate seeds. You taste a spoonful. The icy granules melt instantly, releasing mint's crisp flavor and juicy bursts of pomegranate. You exhale, awed by this ingenious desert treat that traders developed to cool weary travelers. Mainstream sources note such snow was actually crushed ice imported from the mountains, stored in subterranean pits, but fringe legends credit nocturnal sandstorms for naturally freezing the dunes. You roll your eyes affectionately at that one. As you stand there, the bazaar's bustle behind you feels like a heartbeat constant, alive and impossibly ancient. Lanterns sway overhead, perfuming the air with smoke and spice, while voices barter in overlapping cadences, a polyglot chorus of Arabic, Songhai, and Tamashek. You take a final deep breath, letting the myriad aromas and sounds settle into your memory like colored sand layers in a bottle. With your bag a little heavier, laden with toys, parchment scraps, and spice samples, you step back into a quieter alley, leaving the night bazaar's glow behind. You carry its warm luminescence within you, a beacon guiding you toward the next chapter of Timbuktu's nocturnal wonders. You climb a narrow staircase carved into the backside of Sankore Mosque, each uneven step echoing under your sandals as dusk deepens into a rich indigo. At the top, you emerge onto a flat rooftop terrace strewn with woven mats and low wooden stools. Lanterns hang from twisted ropes, their flickering light mingling with the first shy stars peeking through the night sky. A gentle breeze carries the faint scent of date palms and cooling mud brick, a perfume that, tonight, feels like an invitation. You settle onto a mat beside a small group of scholars, their faces tilted skyward, eyes reflecting the cosmos above. In medieval Timbuktu, rooftop observatories were common spots for stargazing, drawing astronomy students and curious merchants alike. Mainstream records tell us that Ahmad Baba, the famed 16th century scholar, often lectured here under the heavens, mapping stars onto parchment by oil lamp. Historians still argue whether these rooftop sessions followed formal curricula imported from Cairo or originated as local gatherings under open skies. But the tradition endures. Knowledge here spills as easily upward as it does across scrolls. A scholar extends a brass astrolabe, not the heavy metal instrument you'd expect, but a smaller, nimble wooden model reinforced with bronze inlays. He hands it to you with a grin that gleams brighter than the nearest star. You hold the astrolabe carefully, turning its reach so the pointers align with recognizable constellations. He guides your fingers, first Polaris, steady as a lighthouse, then Cassiopeia's W, twinkling like the teeth of a grin. Fringe lore claims that Tuareg navigators once calibrated their compasses by the hum of the evening breeze rather than the stars, but you chuckle, preferring your new shiny tool over imaginary windy GPS. Above, the Milky Way unfurls like a milky river of diamonds, slicing the sky in half from horizon to horizon. A scholar recites a verse from Al-Sufi's 10th century treatise, describing the galaxy as the path of souls migrating to the divine. You lean back, letting the theory and the scene wash over you, sand below, stars above, and you, suspended in between like a bead on the universe's necklace. The group falls silent as someone lights a small brazier of scented wood chips, frankincense and myrrh, sending curling wisps of smoke skyward. You inhale deeply, the resin's sweet richness anchoring your drifting mind. A fragrant callback to the manuscript illuminator's gold leaf margins, section 5. This ritual reminds you that even night observatories borrowed attic atmospheres of scriptoriums only here. Ink is replaced by incense. A young apprentice props open a leather-bound volume featuring Ptolemaic star charts layered with later Arabic annotations. He points to a fringe annotation in red ink, the lost constellation of the Desert Lion, said to vanish from the sky when camels roam north in search of pasture. You squint, imagining lion-shaped gaps opening among the constellations like cosmic craters. The senior scholar scoffs gently. Scholars still argue whether that annotation marks an actual observation or a poetic flourish. He says, you nod, comforted by the idea that even experts leave room for wonder. Turning back to the firmament, you spot Orion's belt, a row of 3 bright stars that usher in the dry season. Farmers relied on its appearance to begin planting sorghum, linking celestial cycles to earthly sustenance. Mainstream agricultural manuals from 16th century Timbuktu describe this practice in detail. You snap a mental image, a desert farmer tilting his head back, scythe resting on his shoulder, planting seeds according to Orion's position, no GPS required. A sudden shooting star streaks across the sky, dazzling white then fading. Someone gasps, and the group murmurs about luck for the next caravan season. Fringe astrology enthusiasts insist that each meteor carries a message from Sidi Yahya himself, guiding faithful travelers home. You smirk, imagining text messages delivered by falling stars. You are late. Hurry back. Modern smartphone alerts have nothing on cosmic push notifications. The tallest minaret in the distance casts a dark silhouette against the sky, a solemn reminder of the city below. You recall the rooftop meal of mint tea, section 11, and wonder if tea leaves would taste sweeter under this dome of stars. A scholar offers you a thermos containing softly spiced hibiscus tea, its warmth seeping through the flask into your palm. You take a slow sip, the tart sweetness grounding you against the vastness above. Conversation drifts to the accuracy of early astronomical tables produced in Timbuktu's madrasas. One scholar presents night sky observations he recorded just this week, tracking Jupiter's moons through a borrowed telescope lens. Historians still argue whether such telescopes reached West Africa before the 17th century, or if local craftspeople invented rudimentary refractors independently. You lean in, dazzled by the possibility that these dusty streets birthed optical innovations rivaling Venetian workshops. A gentle joke passes around: if only we could focus that lens on my inbox, we'd finally see those missing messages. A round of soft laughter ripples, joining the natural chorus of night insects and distant mosque bells. Above you, Venus gleams in the western sky, called the evening star and associated with lullabies sung to newborns. In some fringe tales, mothers believed Venus's glow soothed colicky babies if they were rocked under its light. Mainstream medical treatises of the time denote no such benefit, but you silently hope tonight's stargazing might lull you to your own restful dreams later. An elder scholar rises, pointing a telescopic lens toward the horizon, where a faint cluster of stars known now as the Pleiades glimmer like an otherworldly dandelion. He explains how medieval astronomers in Timbuktu used that cluster to navigate the Niger's seasonal floods, anticipating water levels with remarkable precision. Historians still argue whether these methods truly outperformed visual landmark navigation, but you watch the cluster unfold in the telescope's eyepiece like opening a secret window in the sky. Your mind wanders to the spot beneath the baobab tree where the griot once spun the city's founding legend. Section 6. Now, under these same stars, another story takes shape, scholars and dreamers weaving empirical measures and poetic speculations into a living tapestry. You breathe in the incense-laced night, realizing that here, in this terrace of torches and telescopes, history and myth merge in constellations overhead. A final hush falls as the scholars lower their voices, offering a whispered benediction. May the skies guide you as much as the stars guide our words. You close your eyes, feeling that guidance settle into your chest like gentle footprints. Standing, you stretch your arms above your head, arching your back as you take in the celestial panorama one last time. You step down from the terrace, the city lights below flickering like terrestrial stars, and feel a profound kinship with every traveler who looked skyward in search of answers. As you descend the staircase back into the warm glow of candlelit alleys, you carry the night's hush in your bones, knowing that tomorrow's sun will rise as predictably as the stars set tonight, and the cycles of trade, study, and wonder will continue under those same constellations. You slip into a narrow, lamp-lit alley where mud-brick walls lean inward as if sharing secrets, and the hush here feels almost sacred. Lanterns sway from wooden pegs, their dim glow illuminating layers of ancient soot and fresh whitewash, a visual reminder of how today's truths often rest upon yesterday's facades. You advance quietly, every footstep soft against the worn cobblestones, aware that in these hidden corridors, the city's political heart beats in murmurs rather than trumpets. A pair of well-dressed merchants leans against the cool wall, voices low. One holds a rolled parchment, likely a report from a northern caravan, while the other taps a brass seal with restrained excitement. You pause behind a crate of dried hibiscus flowers, straining to catch fragments of their exchange. In Timbuktu's heyday, clandestine council often took place away from the grand courts, tucked into alleys like this, where spies and envoys whispered over silver coins and ink-stained ledgers. Historians still argue whether these meetings were sanctioned by the ruling elite or orchestrated by rival factions seeking an edge. The first merchant hisses. The governor's envoy arrives by dawn, news of Moroccan reinforcements to secure the southern trade routes. His partner's eyes widen, and he replies, "If they control the caravans, they control our revenues. We must alert the council tonight." You imagine the weight of that revelation: salt and gold caravans rerouted under foreign escort, every loaded camel a potential pawn in geopolitics. A chill scuttles up your spine. A soft cough behind you nearly gives you away, so you shift, tucking your satchel closer. The walls narrow further, and you find yourself under an overhang carved with faded Kufic inscriptions. A stray breeze carries the scent of sandalwood oil used by officials to mask sweat during tense negotiations. Fringe rumors claim those who bore sandaled footprints in these alleys were actually elite couriers smuggling secret decrees, but many scholars dismiss that as dramatized folklore. You smile at the idea of frenetic midnight dashes, cloak tails flying, dispatch boxes clinking with coded scrolls. Further down, you spot a small iron ring embedded in the wall, a discreet meeting point known as the Seal of Shadows. Traders press their signet rings into the metal to confirm identities before brokering deals too sensitive for open courtyards. You press your palm against the cool iron, half expecting a coded chime. Only the echo of your heartbeat responds. Just ahead, a figure steps from the darkness into the lantern glow, a robed scholar clutching a sheaf of letters inscribed in Tamashek. He greets a hooded interlocutor with a subtle nod. "The French envoy's letter has been intercepted," he whispers, voice quivering with importance. "They propose alliances against Songhai interests, an offer our council cannot ignore." The hooded figure unfolds a letter, reading by the lantern's light. You glimpse the words trade monopoly and military aid before they roll it back up. Your pulse quickens. The whisper of foreign powers jockeying for influence across the Sahara feels like the undercurrent of a game where the stakes are more than gold, their destiny. Did these shadows shape empires? Historians still argue whether European envoys ever reached Timbuktu's inner circles or only traded rumors in coastal oases. But here in this alley, such conjecture snaps into vibrant reality. A cat slinks past, its eyes reflecting the lantern light like twin moons. Locals claim these alley cats once bore messages in tiny pouches strapped to their collars, crossing between rival factions undetected. You watch it disappear into a barrel of dates, imagining a feline courier with diplomatic immunity. At a low bench beneath a dusty window, a group gathers around a clay brazier. They pass around a leather-bound ledger detailing tax receipts and bribes paid to provincial governors. Every so often, one participant peers through the window's lattice, ensuring no prying eyes. You lean closer and make out a line. 20 mythicals of gold diverted to the governor's son. You nearly choke. 20 mythicals is a fortune. Enough to finance a small army or fund a scholar's lifetime of manuscripts. The conversation shifts to internal council rivalries. Merchants aligned with the governor of Gao versus those loyal to Jenna's elite. They debate whether to support a local coup or broker a peace treaty that secures trade but binds them to onerous terms. Historians still argue whether such coup plots actually materialized or remain speculative threats, but you absorb every nuance as if you were part of the cabal. Somewhere behind you, a soft wind whistles through a crack in the wall, carrying distant echoes of hammering in the mosques, an auditory reminder that faith and politics here coexist uneasily. A scholar remarks that the muezzin's call might soon drown out courtly deliberations if the city descends into conflict. You note how even divine rituals can serve as cover for clandestine moves. As the meeting concludes, the scholars exchange small tokens, tiny cowrie shells threaded on a reed, each marking a point in their agreement. You watch a final handoff, a vellum scroll sealed with red wax bearing an unfamiliar crest. Without a word, they disperse into branching alleys, shadows merging into deep indigo. Left alone, you stand beneath the Seal of Shadows, lantern light flickering overhead. The alleys are silent now, keeping their counsel until the next whisper. You brush dust from your robe, your mind racing with the realization that you've witnessed history's hidden machinery in motion: trade, power, and intrigue entwined like climbing vines on these ancient walls. You step back onto the main street, the bustle of evening revival greeting you like a warm wave, yet you carry the alley's hush within you, a secret current of political possibility and peril. In Timbuktu, the grand mosques and market stalls may dominate the daylight, but by night, the city's true pulse beats in whispered alliances and concealed strategies. You slip past the final row of lantern-lit stalls and emerge onto the northern ramparts of Timbuktu, where the city's mud-brick silhouette merges with the star-faded horizon. A soft breeze drifts in from the desert, carrying with it the faint susurrus of distant camels settling for the night. You lean against the rampart wall, tracing the weathered contours of the battlements each notch, and crack a record of centuries spent standing guard against both sandstorms and armies. Below you, the city's lanterns wink awake, one by one, like earthbound stars rising to meet their celestial counterparts. In the Golden Age, these ramparts served not only as defense, but as vantage points for sentinels watching over caravans arriving by moonlight. Historians still argue whether the ramparts were originally constructed under the Mali Empire or reinforced later by Moroccan engineers, but tonight, you're perched between past and present, witnessing a timeless vigil. A solitary guard paces along the wall, his leather jerkin creaking softly. He pauses to draw water from a skin, sipping and scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Fringe tales claim that guards once used polished copper mirrors to flash coded light signals across the desert, an ancient semaphore system, but most scholars dismiss it as fanciful. Still, you admire the idea, a network of torchlight beacons sending messages across miles of sand. You step out onto a small platform where an aged scholar sets up a simple reed bench. He greets you with a nod and unveils a slender reed notebook bound with sinew, the last thing you expected to see under the night sky. He explains he's been mapping the city's geometry, the angles of walls, the spacing of towers, even the thickness of mud brick layers, all to calculate how the ramparts radiate thermal mass. Mainstream architectural studies confirm that these calculations once helped regulate interior temperatures, but historians still argue whether such precision was intentional or emerged through generational trial and error. The scholar offers you a reed-lined stool, and you sit, letting the cool night air seep through gaps in the mud brick. He points out a low crescent moon hanging above the mosque of Sidi Yahya, its curve mirrored by the battlement's crescent-shaped bastions. Geometry is the language of creation, he murmurs, and here, we speak it with every wall. You trace the moon's arc, feeling a soft tug of connection between earth and sky. Below, the Niger's dark waters reflect the city's glow in ghostly ripples. You recall the rumors of submerged manuscripts hidden along the riverbank after Moroccan raids, texts bobbing beneath wooden docks, waiting for rescue. Fringe divers claim to have recovered fragments of poetry from the riverbed, but mainstream conservators caution that waterlogged parchments rarely survive intact. You gaze down, imagining silent scrolls drifting in the current, carrying voices from a lost chapter of history. A gentle wind stirs, and you smell smoldering date palm husks from kitchens below, a smoky echo of the spice bazaars you wandered earlier. You breathe deeply, letting the scent anchor you to the city's daily rhythms even as you hover in its loftiest heights. The scholar unrolls a vellum scroll depicting a rough map of the city's defenses and water channels. He traces a finger along the course of ancient irrigation ditches that once fed gardens atop the walls, an oasis in miniature, where citrus trees and honeybees thrived. Mainstream records describe these rooftop gardens as essential for senior officials' banquets. Historians still argue whether the gardens were utilitarian or primarily ornamental, but you can't help picturing lemon trees spilling blossoms over the ramparts. Soft laughter drifts up from below a group of travelers sharing a late meal around a fire pit near the city gate. They raise their mugs in salute when they spot you above. You raise yours in return. Community here isn't confined to cathedral mosques or scholarly debates. It extends to every hearth and gathering. You rise with the scholar and walk to the extreme edge of the ramparts, looking eastward where the city's mud-brick towers taper into rolling dunes. The desert beyond lies silent, vast, and inscrutable, a reminder that Timbuktu's brilliance always teetered on the edge of desolation. You feel the night air cool your skin, as if the desert itself exhales a collective sigh of relief at the day's end. A final tiny smile plays across the scholar's lips as he closes his notebook. "May these walls guard your dreams," he says softly, echoing the city's eternal promise of protection and knowledge. You nod, feeling the truth of his words settle in your chest. You linger a moment longer, letting the wind carry away the day's heat, trading the bustle below for the silent watch of stars above. Then, with a last look at the tranquil sprawl of lamps and mud-brick skyline, you step back from the wall, carrying both the ramparts' stoic strength and their whispered stories into your own dreams. Now the city's heartbeat slows, and our footsteps soften against the cool ramparts as night unfolds its gentle veil. You feel the desert's hush wrap around you like a warm blanket, each grain of sand settling into stillness beneath the moon's pale glow. Let your thoughts drift with the river's silent current, carrying away the day's colors, sounds, and chatter until only soft echoes remain. Stars shimmer above, their distant light brushing your eyelids as you stand between earth and sky. In this tranquil moment, every wall, every lantern, and every whispered secret fades into a calm resonance within your chest. You are neither traveler nor scholar now, but a silent witness to the timeless dance of dust and divine light. Allow the cool night breeze to ease the desert's warmth from your bones. Breathe in the rich aroma of date palms and frankincense. Exhale the last flickers of excitement from the marketplace, and sense the city's stories settling around you like fallen feathers. Each exhalation brings you closer to a place of quiet rest. Feel the ramparts beneath your feet, sturdy and unhurried, their centuries-old strength lending you a sense of safety. Imagine those walls cradling your dreams as you descend into slumber, just as they stand watch over the city's slumber below. Now, dim the scene to the softest whisper of memory. Let your mind drift to the ancient springs, the candle-lit scriptoriums, the echoing calls to prayer, and the lantern-lit bazaars, each moment a gentle lullaby guiding you toward rest. Your journey through Timbuktu's magic has come to its final pause, and it is time to surrender to the night's embrace. Good night, brave traveler, sleep well beneath these desert stars, and may tomorrow's dawn find you refreshed, your dreams enriched by the whispers of a city that never truly sleeps.